So I'm actually live now, and I'm gonna talk a little funny because I need to have headphones on, otherwise the audio gets weird. And yeah, my audio's coming in slightly delayed on the headphones, so I'm gonna try and ignore it, but we'll see how that goes. Yeah. Anyway, I'm coming to you guys live from TD, in my room, hanging out. It's currently Trans Day of Visibility, which is super cool. And I'll be honest with you, I that was not the first thought I had this morning when I woke up. The first thought that I had this morning was like, oh goodness, I have to go to Yale Health to get blood drawn because my endocrinologist needs blood samples so that they can monitor my hormone levels and stuff. Just little trans things. So yeah, I guess that's one way to wake up to Trans Day Visibility. But anyway, for those of you already tuning in, what's up? Feel free to shoot me some sort of a message or something if you can't hear me, because honestly, I have no idea how the audio is. Um, but hopefully it's good. um, yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start off by saying that this is probably the first year that I'm like actively thinking about this day. Last year around this time, what is it, April? Yeah, last year around this time, I was still kind of like, I was like out-ish, but not really. I was still kind of working through my own things, and I was kind of very slowly making the transition into like having people call me Nat and stuff. So it's weird to be sitting here now and be talking to you guys and being like, hey, guess what? Like, I'm your local friendly trans person. um, but yeah, I think I wanted to touch on a Facebook status that I just read from one of my dear friends that I definitely resonate with a lot. That Trans Day of Visibility is, definitely. I also have a lot of mixed feelings about this day. I think it's good to have a day where there is visibility for trans people, that it is like a day reserved for, like, seeing trans people. But I also understand the feeling that like it sucks that there has to be a day like that, that we can't, you know, that like there needs to be a specific day set aside to be like, hey, these kinds of people exist. But that's the way of the world. Um, and I definitely resonated with the portion of the status where my friend was like, like for cisgender people out there, this day is like kind of for you, but not really. It's definitely more for the people out there who need to see people like me and need to see other trans people like out there in the open, to show them that like, hey, we do exist. We are out here. We are living lives. We are succeeding in the things that we want to do. We are alive. We are well. And that's definitely not to ignore the various problems that other trans people face, but that it is possible to exist and to be happy and well in the world as a trans person. Even if at times it's difficult, it is possible. So definitely just want to put that out there. Um, yeah, I honestly don't have like a whole lot of plans for this. I kind of just figured I'd come on here and just kind of start rambling about what it's like to be trans, what it's like to exist in the world as a trans person. Um, and I'm also open to any suggestions, comments, questions, anything you guys might have out there for me. Feel free to shoot me a message on Facebook or anything. I have my phone right here, ready to respond. Um, but yeah, I think one of the things that I do want to talk about actually is that I experienced, I guess, what I could only really call like cisgender privilege for the first time in a few years. What I mean by that was that I actually had an extended period of time where I was 0% thinking about like my gender identity, and like 0% questioning it, 0% having anxiety over it, which is wild. And I like, it's hard for me to understand that like the majority of people go about every single day feeling that way, right? So I was in Colombia over spring break for about 10 days, the country, not the university. Um, and being in Colombia, being in a Spanish speaking country, I was kind of nervous about the fact that, like, in English, I identify as non binary and I use gender neutral pronouns. And I had absolutely no vocabulary or translation for that in Spanish. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go. I'm kind of just going to roll with it. I'm most likely going to get identified as a guy and, like, whatever, like, I'll deal with it, right? So I was going kind of prepared for it to bother me, for me to be agitated by it in some way. And, like, unless somebody asked me for my passport, I was always gendered as a guy. And I was like, okay. And initially I was ready for it. Like, I was bracing myself for, like, for feeling weird about it. But it turns out that I was actually weirdly comforted by it. Like, it was oddly liberating because I guess, knowing and assuming that people were going to address me a certain way and that there wasn't really an alternative way to be addressed or anything that I could say for them to, like, anything that I could say that would translate properly in Spanish for people to address me, like, as non-binary and, like, with gender neutral pronouns. Um, it was almost like nice to not have that option. Um, and I thought about it and I was like, wow, like, not having to think about or, like, constantly assert your gender identity is nice. is is really really nice, to just kind of, like, function in the world in, like, one way, and, like, to have people assume something about you that is, like, I guess, correct, and to not have to explain it or anything like that. I was like, wow, I forgot what this felt like. It's been a very very long time since I felt that way. um, and so it kind of just blew my mind, and I've been thinking about it since I've been back here, just because obviously now that I'm back at Yale, back in, like, an English speaking context, people do address me, like, with they, them, theirs, and, like, they do understand that I'm non binary. And I've been, like, it's definitely caused me to, like, be thrust back into that framework of thinking about gender and thinking about, like, my identity and stuff. Um, and I think now I'm more at peace with it just because I've had the experience of being in Colombia and being addressed, like, as a guy, and, like, not having that really be a question. Um, just in the sense that, like I find that I'm not obsessing as much over my identity as I used to because of that experience, which has definitely helped, like, in terms of, like, my anxieties around gender. This isn't to say, just to clarify, this isn't to say that, like, in English, I'm like, I want people to address me as a male, like, as male. I don't want, I'm still not looking for, like, he, him, his pronouns or anything like that. Um, but this is more just, like, a commentary on, like, the fact that I exist in, like, one specific identity in the Spanish speaking context that uh, that doesn't necessarily line up perfectly with my identity in an English speaking context, and understanding that I can occupy those two identities in, like, their separate contexts and both are legitimate. But anyway, now that I'm back here, non-binary, they, them, theirs. So just stick with that in English. If you're addressing me in Spanish, then go for it. Like, just, use, like, the traditional male ending pronouns and stuff. Yeah. Hold up. Let's see. It looks like I have a question. Give me one second. Ooh, okay. Yes. Thank you for the question. So I've also been thinking about the usage of Latino, Latina versus, like, Latinx, um, and what that means in, like, a broader Latin American context. It's a very, very, very difficult question. And I've been thinking about it a lot just because I've had, like, the discussions in different classes and thinking about like my senior thesis and how I'm most likely going to be writing about like transgender identity production in Latin America, and obviously narrowing that focus down to like specific regions. But um, right here, a friend of mine commented that apparently a lot of people at the University of Puerto Rico have started using Latinx and X suffixes as gender neutral. And I think that that case is particularly interesting, given Puerto Rico's ties to the United States, and the prevalence of the English language in Puerto Rico versus like other Latin American countries. I guess Puerto Rico is not technically a Latin American country, but uh, we can talk about that another time. But that's a very interesting point, and I think it's interesting that this is something that's happening there, um, and that isn't really gaining traction anywhere else. And like especially like in countries in Latin America, the use of Latinx, like as far as I know, has very little traction. I spent a good portion of time the other day like looking up looking up Latinx in like Spanish, like looking up Latinx in Latino America or Latinx in Espanol and stuff like that, trying to really like find the results. And like pretty much nothing comes up but articles debating the usage of the term like in English or like in English speaking context. And so I think that that's something that I've been trying to figure out the usefulness of the term Latinx. I definitely think it's useful in English speaking contexts, but I'm still wrestling with the idea of a Latinx identity in Spanish speaking contexts, specifically like in Spanish speaking countries, just because like this idea of a non-binary or like gender neutral or like agender identity, um, I just have not encountered enough of in like in my interactions with people in Latin America, like both in person, um, or like through like online communities. And so it's kind of like this Latinx term is definitely like a more global north construction, um, that I found useful in terms of identifying myself like as somebody who's grown up in the US and who lives in the US and speaks English. But again, like going back to how I was talking about Colombia, like it was something that I didn't really find necessary or relevant when I was in a Spanish speaking context. Like it just, I don't know, it didn't feel right in a sense. Like I felt like if I were to take something like that and bring it into like the Spanish speaking context in a Spanish speaking country, it almost felt like I was doing something imperialist. Like taking this idea of like gender and gender identity that I picked up somewhere in like the US or in an English speaking context and bringing it there. It didn't sit quite right with me. So definitely wrestling with that. And if anybody else has anything like that they want to say about that, any opinions that they have about it, that'd be like I'm 100% like down to hear, down to talk about it, just because like I have my own personal opinions on it, um, but would love to hear like from other people. I especially like if anybody knows anybody who like lives in Latin America in a Spanish speaking country and like has encountered this term or has like an opinion about this term there, that'd be super cool. Um, and also relevant to my thesis. So if you find somebody like that or somebody wants to talk about something like that, point them my way. Um, but yeah, I just have a lot of thoughts about that. Yeah. Hmm. I guess it's kind of weird being on a live stream. I don't really know what to say, what to tell you lovely people out there, other than I hope you're having a good time listening to me just rant about things. Ooh, I've got 10 people watching. Who are you guys? Does anybody want to say hello? Also, my audio is slightly delayed, I think, on the actual stream, so if you want to say hi, feel free to. um, so I don't feel like I'm just talking to myself. um, let's see, what else can I talk to you guys about? Um, oh, oh, I just lost a watcher. It's fine. Anyway, I guess like a quick poll for whoever actually can respond or wants to respond. If you have any if you have any specific memories or moments like like trans people in media or in popular culture that you want to talk about or share, that'd be something I'm definitely down to talk about. Um, I personally remember like when Orange is the New Black started, and like it was like a super huge deal that they had. Um, Hello, my friends. Let's see. Hi, SGH. Hi, Sasha. Hi, Steph and Rebecca. um, anyway, I remember when Orange is the New Black came out, and like it was this super huge deal. Hello, Karen. It was a super huge deal that there was finally like a trans character on this show, right? And it was it was wild because it was like not only did we have a trans character, but we had like a black trans woman who actually had like a narrative and a storyline, and like was actually like a pretty fleshed out and well received character. Um, and I just remember that was like a huge deal, especially like to me, like that like the show came out, that like first season came out. I think what was it, freshman year? It was like freshman year, right? And like I wasn't like in a stage of my life where I was thinking about like trans things. I was definitely thinking about gender, and I had started identifying as gender queer, but that was about as far as I got. So then once the show came out and like it was like the first season, it was like I binge watched it 100% and it was great. And just seeing like the existence of this character like in popular culture, I was like, whoa, like this is wild, right? Um, and then obviously like as time went on, like I started seeing, like more of this representation. Definitely not nearly as much as there should be or could be, but hopefully we'll get there one day. This is me representing trans people in popular social media here on YouTube slash Facebook, etc., etc. Um, but yeah, I remember that was a big deal. Um, I remember when like Jeanette Mock first started like blowing up on social media, like with her book and stuff, and how like that book definitely sparked a lot of like interesting conversations that I've been a part of. And I remember when I actually met Jeanette Mock, like she came to Yale and she was here for a talk, and uh, two of my classes got to have like a special session with her, and she literally sat right next to me, like she was right next to me, and I like raised my hand to ask her a question, and when I asked her a question, she like turned and she like stared me in my eyes, and I was like, oh my god, I just made like personal eye contact with Jeanette Mock, and this is like a huge deal. um, and like yes, of course, like I was like definitely like having this like fan moment, but like at the same time, I was like, here is like a trans person like in the flesh who like has, I guess in a sense, made it, who has like really just been like a part of this very important representation for the community, um, that I didn't know was possible, and it was amazing to just like see her there, you know. Oh, a question. What media do you recommend that has trans characters? Ooh, okay. So, I mean, obviously, Orange is the New Black is one of them. That just has a lot of good representation for a lot of reasons. Obviously, it has its own problems that we can get to at another point in our lives. Just like every piece of popular media and culture has its own problems. Um, let's see. Man, it's hard. It's really hard. Like, I'm trying to think of like examples. I also just like don't watch enough like TV to really say. But let's see. Like I watched Transparent for class a couple of weeks ago, which was an interesting watch. was definitely an interesting take on like a specific kind of trans experience. And it's really hard to find media that showcases trans people um, that like actually feels like the media is like catering to trans people. It usually feels like trans people are included in stories like written by cis people for cis people, and they tend to like trans people in those or in that media tend to be like plot devices. So I guess it's difficult to find that. Books and movies also count. Okay, see the interesting thing about books, um, is that like unless like if you think about it, unless like an author specifically states that like somebody is like cisgender, or they give like enough markers to make that assumption, you can pretty much make like any of the characters trans, and like if you are somebody who is trans, then that's pretty fun just because like you can pretty much like adapt the storyline to whatever like your mind wants it to be, which is great. And thinking about movies, hmm. Like that feeling when you have like an answer to a specific question, but as soon as it's asked to you, you just forget everything. That's literally me right now. I'll have to get back to you on that. Maybe when I take my little break in a few minutes, I'll look into it and try and remember all of the things I've clearly forgotten just now. Um, but yeah, see, I'm just hanging out. Ooh, people messaging me things. Cool. Um, let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna take a break in a few minutes, but I guess before that break, I'll leave you all with this. Don't forget the place of trans people, and more specifically trans people of color in in like the history of queerness, both in the U.S. and otherwise. Um, but like right now I'm thinking specifically of the US, but like don't forget that the role that they have played, don't forget the path that these people have paved for us to exist, both trans people and other queer people who are not trans. Um, a lot of the wonderful freedoms, I guess, that we enjoy today, a lot of the progress that has allowed us to continue to exist today is because of those people, is because of the struggle that they carried on their backs, and so they deserve to be remembered and they deserve to be honored for the hard work that they have done. I'm thinking of like Marsha P. Johnson and Miss Major and Sylvia Rivera, and all those people who were really, really like out there fighting to survive in a world that actively rejected them every single day. And when they fought for that struggle and they fought for that survival, they fought for it for themselves, but also for the community as a whole. And that's something that not a lot of people can say that they would do. That a lot of people are down to fight for their own struggles, but then once you tell them like, oh hey, but like what about these other people who need it too, like they'll be like, I don't really care. But they definitely carried a huge load and changed the course of history for queerness in the US. So don't forget those people because they are super important. But yeah, definitely just wanted to put that out there. I'm definitely gonna get water when I go on this break. Oh my god. Um, yeah, I'm gonna dip in like 30 seconds. But for those of you guys who tuned in for this first half, thank you for being here. Thanks for hanging out. I'll be back in about 15 minutes after I drink some water and chill and try and think about more things to talk about. Feel free to send me messages, any comments, questions in the meantime, if you have any ideas for things I should talk about. Um, but yeah, I think maybe in the next session I will cover a little bit of my own like personal journey at Yale. I'll do like a quick summary or something, just for people who are curious and too afraid to ask. Because like I'm totally down to talk about it. And yeah, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks for tuning in, my friends. I'll be back in 15 minutes.